Welcome to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. My name is Michael Mann. I am the host, and today I will be serving as the moderator of our Bring a Friend series, AI in Healthcare, revolutionizing patient care. And we have some amazing guests today, esteemed guests. Thomas Kluz, venture capitalist with over 20 years of experience, who is currently running a corporate venture fund. Matthew Douglas, who's CEO, founder of Digitize, Microsoft AI partner, also Silent Inception, ethical use of AI to counteract unethical and nation state. Dr. Alyssa Albo, she's a physician innovator, board member, leader in digital health and med tech. Sunnie Southern, product manager leader, health and life sciences, tech and AI with experience at Sanofi, Takeda, Google, 3X founder, and Gen A enthusiast. Let's get solving. Love that tagline. Heather Leigh Flannery, she's the CEO of AI Minded Systems Foundation, chair, healthcare and life sciences, applied futurist. So looking forward to this. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. All right, so here we are. This is real, and we're going to take it forward. So who wants to start? Who wants to dive first? Who wants to be our first speaker on this AI revolution we're in the midst of? Is it really going to help patient care or not? What do we think?
Well, I'll chime in. My name is Matt Douglas, and my prior engagement was, when I came to healthcare, I came to a health system in Virginia. I was the chief enterprise architect, and my first duty was, I came from CPG, big, manufacturing around the globe, and I got an opportunity, literally my first month, to speak on Wall Street for Equinix, and it was about, what was I going to do, and what was I going to do coming to healthcare. And my main goal, because of breast cancer running in my family, my mother had a double mastectomy, my first wife had a stage 4 breast cancer, just cancer after cancer after cancer, was to reduce the mortality rate in breast cancer. It was like a purpose-driven thing why I came to healthcare, as opposed to killing animals, saving humans. And I had the ability to get involved in deconstructed packs, which was getting away from the traditional Fuji, AgFed, all kind of stuff, and do deconstructed. So then we could actually use large data sets to start looking at early diagnosis, literally comparing the data with all the different, mammograms and things like that, and all the ologies. We started using data sets to start comparing using computer vision. I can say today, and that was 7 years ago, the mortality rate to breast cancer has dramatically decreased because of the leveraging of first look AI and things like that, correlation of data and correlation of actually because you and I can only see an image for 45 minutes, A lot of the clinicians did not like the fact that we're going to do that because they thought it was going to cut their job, but it didn't. It actually increased the overall patient care, and it increased the, overall not limiting the mortality rate. So there is good use cases in my mind, and that was a giant one that I can say today that I was a part of.
Yeah, I think, when you think about kind of healthcare more broadly, I was talking to a management consultant yesterday who's been doing healthcare consulting for about 30 years. And I asked him about his impressions of AI, and I'm going to kind of riff off of this because it really, really resonated with me more so than most things. He had sort of indicated that, the last 30 years, healthcare has become disproportionately more complex. And part of that is driven by the fact that we've seen an influx of new technology, connected devices, and digital footprint with the advent and inception of electronic medical records. And so I love when you're talking about, diagnostics and personalized medicine and mammograms, because I think a lot of the reason we're able to reduce mortality rates in healthcare due to AI is the fact that data sets exist, right? So these data sets have grown exponentially. It's been Moore's law in healthcare now for 20 years. And what I think AI is capable of doing is it's actually able to make sense of all of them, right? We have this abyss of data. We developed a kind of digital footprint in the healthcare ecosystem. And I think the purpose of AI at the end of the day is to simplify healthcare. Haven't gotten there yet. I think we're at the very beginning of the journey, but that's, in my mind, that's the single, that's the single purpose of AI.
I'd love to jump in on just a point of view about defining healthcare from a first principles perspective. We have, all of the discourse about sick care versus health, and we all know in our industry that social determinants of health are the most predictive of both population and depending on what measures we look at, we know that in the U.S. health economy, we're spending more and have continued to spend more per capita, and our pop health and health equity endpoints continue to, they're at least stagnant, if not worsening across a number of areas. I think the question is, if we wish to improve well-being, which includes mental and physical health, but I like the 8-point definition of well-being that SAMHSA uses under HHS. I think that it's clear that there are structural problems in our system. I mean, Tom, you brought up the radical proliferation of digital health point solutions and connected smart devices and extraordinary technologies, and the general thesis of the investor class that has fueled that explosion may have been effective in creating the appreciation of equity in those companies. But at a macroscopic level, unfortunately, even though I'm a technologist, I'm a technical progressivist, but unfortunately, all of that incredible technical work has failed to move the needle at the scale that our society needs. So with that, to me, it is about structural interventions, structural change as being self-evidently necessary. And okay, so if new structures, what structures, and how would we validate those? How would we attempt? I think it is absolutely critical to move to a model that is not hypothetically or metaphorically person-centered, not the hand-wavy. We want to make people feel like they're the center of the experience, but actually it's all quite metaphoric, because individual people cannot be actors in our data economy, in our, they cannot participate. There's all kinds of blockers to facilitating the kind of empowerment of the individual that could be achieved if you had true self-sovereignty of AI, self-sovereignty of digital twins, and technological parity that is now possible because of the way that AI can empower a person.
Heather, Heather, I think we have someone that wants to respond back. Do I hear someone that wants to respond?
I feel like you're looking at me. So, I would love to jump in and add a bit of the physician perspective. I'm a bit of a tech nerd, and Heather, I love the way you describe your involvement in tech, being a progressivist. So I'm a bit of a tech nerd, and as an emergency physician, also a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, which bodes well for being in tech and medicine. It's really interesting. To answer your question, Michael, I do think that AI obviously has a huge role in healthcare, but really the question is, how do we get there, and how do we do it in a thoughtful way that we can actually drive innovation and push the needle forward? And I think a lot of it comes from even the diversity on this panel alone, like having the different voices and the different stakeholders at the table, and then really have conversations of how do we ensure that AI is adapted in a way that is what we're intending for it to do, which is, to Tom's point, help us as physicians take better care of patients, and also not only improve the life of our patients, but we also improve the lives and the workflow of those taking care of patients. So docs, nurse, pharmacists, the ecosystem is huge, and there's so much value to AI that I really think that if we think about it really thoughtfully and mindfully, and we have the right people at the table to have these types of conversations, it will have a huge impact. But again, the question for me is always like, how do we really get there?
So I'd love to jump in, and I really appreciate everyone's perspective. I'd like to talk about health equity for a minute. And so each of you have touched on different aspects of how we make sure that we create AI models that are more equitable. And really, in the end, as Alyssa said, it really starts with getting the right people around the table. And it's so critical that we have the right data in order to leverage, in order to train these models. So I think the people on this call definitely think about that AI holds great promise, but we need to make sure that we're also ensuring equitable outcomes. So as we all know, many of the AI tools are trained on data sets that may unintentionally perpetuate historical biases. And because our healthcare system in and of itself, and most of the products that we develop from a therapeutic perspective also have biases for a number of very legitimate reasons, we really need to also think about how we develop robust principles for responsible AI in the healthcare environment. And so I would love to hear from others about opportunities to incorporate these diverse voices from patients, as well as diverse data sets, to ensure that as we're developing models, we're building them with equitable data. What do you all think?
So I'll go first. I think you are spot on, Sunnie. So one of my first roles outside of academic medicine was VP partnerships at a real world data startup. And so much of the focus there was on good quality data and understanding that, you don't want it to be garbage in, garbage out. And so how do we ensure that the data that goes into these models is the right data? And I think that lends itself to one of the other things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is the adoption piece and what it takes to get there. In my mind, there's not always a lot of transparency of the data going into some of these algorithms. And I think that physicians would be more inclined to potentially incorporate some of these AI algorithms or technologies into their workflow if they had more transparency and understood the data that was going into these models, and ensuring that really reflects the population of patients that they care for. So I also would love to hear from others, but I think that you are spot on in bringing up the data point.
I agree with both of you, Sunnie and Dr. Albo. I would love to add an additional vector of thinking about responsible or ethical AI, and that there is no AI at training or at runtime absent data, and it is only as good as the data. We do have tremendous amounts of garbage in, garbage out problem, and there's only so much you can do with annotation and enrichment after the fact of data capture. We need to move to models and frameworks where we can prospectively specify a data requirement outside of formal clinical trials and create incentives to have the data that is necessary to be able to recruit the diverse subjects, to be able to get the quality, the proprietary nature, the details that are necessary, and critically, that requires a new data economy. Today's data economy does not include data subjects in any material way. $121.6 billion trade per year in de-identified health information, which 0% accrues to the data subjects. And I have a thesis that truly ethical AI must also be economically just AI. And there is a tremendous amount of opportunity to incorporate interventional health economic approaches that leverage a new data economy to get to responsible AI that is inclusive in a financial way, especially for vulnerable and underserved populations.
I think this is fascinating, and this topic of making sure that we are essentially compensating the patients who are providing their data to us to do whatever we're going to do, whether it's their insights to build an application or improve patient experience at a hospital, or their data in order to build models. And something that we've really grappled with, there are definitely trade-offs, right? So how do we equitably reimburse patients or participants without artificially incentivizing them to provide us with what data it is that they think that we need to hear? And there are some interesting companies out there that I've seen do pretty cool stuff, but I'd love to hear from you all about what you're seeing that has either worked or gone terribly wrong when we start to financially or externally incent people to provide us with data.
Yeah, Josh, I feel like I'm on a panel here with people interested. Some of these topics are absolutely amazing, and I wish I had like I have more questions than I have comments or responses to some of the topics that are going on here, but I'll kind of unpack a theme that you all discussed about equality or equity, and then more specifically a company that I backed that had actually faced a bit of bias in the AI algorithms, and then we had a little bit of digital divide in relation to creating accessibility to the algorithms, right? I had backed a company a couple of years ago that was an AI clinical trial recruitment platform. So it was using AI to better facilitate clinical trials. So it was upstream doing the recruiting, and then downstream facilitating some of the, call it, manual processes that occur with the clinical trial ecosystem. So when you think about it, I won't name the name of the company, but it's not hard to find which company I'm alluding to. But the goal here was decentralizing the clinical trial ecosystem. But when push came to shove, I think the technology was good, the AI was robust. I think we got there from an operational kind of automation perspective, but the challenge was digital divide, right? So we had patients that, we actually, we wanted a good, very fair and equitable, diverse set of patients. But because of the lean on certain types of access to technology, we ended up getting a slightly biased data set, and that was completely unintentional, right? We went out, built a company, the algorithms really worked, but there was clearly some bias in what we had developed. And I don't know. I don't have the response to that. I don't know what the solution to that is, other than developing, call it, making the connected ecosystem ubiquitous, right? That was the only thing. I mean, this was done 3 or 4 years ago. The access to technology was somewhat limited then. I think the world has come a long way just in the last 4 to 5 years. But I mean, what does everyone think about just the I guess there's a lot of themes here, but just purely the digital divide part of AI, right? What are people seeing as solutions to that?
So I worked on the original data interoperability with Truveta, which was a consortium of Epic providers, payer providers that then did data interoperability of their data to do better precision medicine and patient outcomes. And that was pretty awesome. I also worked on Yale University's clinical research platform that they developed, and then some things with NIH around clinical research and like the extension of humanity in their age, and like you said, it's all about the data sets and where you get your data. You got to kind of understand, like they're saying, leveraging AI and stem cell therapy, the first human that will live to the 150 years of age has been born. Pretty cool stuff. But then you get into the part of, here's what my concern is. Data interoperability, when you have one EMR that everybody uses and they control the data in a centralized point. So they've already been called out for antitrust practices by the United States government. I think we need to start looking at that also at the AI level. So who controls the data? If it's one central EMR, could they impact the entire globe of their client base, which is tremendous amounts? Could they impact that user base and the decisions coming out? Like, one of the things is medical disparacy. So I was able to work with a couple, chief medical officers in Northern Virginia that we identified like certain communities, certain regions didn't have the funding for mental health for teenagers or adolescents and things like that, as where the rural areas did. So the treatment plans were way diverse. So you didn't get the same consistent treatment plan. So one of the things was now with precision medicine, the data sets, like a doctor cannot divert from a treatment plan from 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go to treatment plan 4 in this EMR, it says you're pretty much liable. So then we look at the ability to use AI to go back and look at the data sets and file lawsuits for malpractice because you didn't follow a specific treatment plan. So if we use AI against the treatment plans, they probably could identify a lot of malpractice. So just throwing that out there.
So I'd love to follow up. Thank you, Matthew. And I'd really love to respond to Tom's comments and questions. First of all, Tom, given your level of experience and expertise, I really applaud you for saying you have more questions than answers, because we are in a world today where, I'm sorry, but we all should have more questions than answers. The technology is moving and changing faster than any of us have ever seen with any technology that's ever existed before. And so I think it's very, it's the right thing to be as inquisitive. So thank you for being willing to say that. That's really fantastic. I'd also say that I'd love to have a sidebar conversation about AI specifically and equitable data sets in clinical trials and in other ways. It's something that I'm really interested in. It's something we do a lot of work in, and we talk a lot about at Verily, specifically around the Health Equity Center of Excellence. I want to respond specifically to some things that you think, like how we might make this better. One of the things I think is that I believe AI has the potential to be the great equalizer, because we have the ability to now use natural language on multiple surfaces, whether it's typing in your phone or on a computer or using your voice, in order to derive insights or provide information in a way that we have never had before. So, we no longer have to only use, SQL command line control, like commands, in order to access and analyze data. We can actually use our own voice. We are going to have to be super thoughtful, and we need people, frankly, like you, Tom, and all of us, to invest in being thoughtful about how we address the digital divide. So just a couple more seconds here. I grew up in West Virginia. My family still runs a company in West Virginia. My brother is the president of that company, but until about within the last year, he didn't have access to broadband. When he went home, nothing worked very well. Even his cell phone was okay, but everything else was really bad. And until we get widespread access to broadband, we make sure that people have access to some sort of device that allows them to tap into that, we are going to not just, we're going to really amplify the digital divide. And so I think we all need to be aware of that. And I hope that we're all doing our best to find ways to improve that. Love to hear from others.
I just really quickly would love to remark and applaud Department of Commerce's activities right now out of NTIA with the State Digital Equity Grant Program. There's 3 more weeks for each state to apply for a $60 billion pool against achieving digital equity. And a big soapbox of mine is that digital equity is healthcare. It is in a digital first health environment, and in modernity, digital equity is absolutely directly connected to health equity and health outcomes. So Sunnie, totally spot on. Just a couple of quick things. I feel like a number of the complications and risks associated with AI and the business structural problems that have been highlighted all map to a particular focus area of mine, which has to do with this idea that AI as a discrete technology has a host of problems that are difficult to solve unless you converge it with some other exponential technologies. So in architectures and business models that converge blockchain and Web3 ideas with privacy enhancing technologies like zero knowledge cryptography and other measures along those lines, hardware and software based trusted and verifiable compute modalities. If you converge those 3 families of technologies and place it in a new business model where this center of gravity for value creation comes not from big data, where you have the largest series size, but rather from the most multimodal data, the most diverse data, and the most verifiable and trusted, full context, longitudinal, identified, moving away from the reliance on de-identified and synthetic data sets, mitigating drift, all of those types of things can be enabled if, to your question about where is this data if everything is all in one central EHR and Epic's a QHIN now. What does that mean for us? And there is a possibility to create a literally person-centered system, as opposed to a metaphorically person-centered system. And that is an AI blockchain privacy tech convergence play, but it also requires entirely new institutions, new business models. There's at least a couple of points of regulatory harmonization that would have to happen. But yeah, I think that has potential.
Hey, Matthew, you kind of brought up, you sort of implied the topic of interoperability, right? Because to your point, a bolus of data is in kind of one central place, but there's data elsewhere in the world that when you combine that, the combinatorics there actually can be equalizers and can provide a ton of compute and predictive power. What are you seeing in the world of interoperability standards? Because that's been since I've been an investor, 20 years now, interoperability has always been a pain point, but I haven't really kept up to date as to what the latest and greatest are today. Is there anything that's just really catching your eye in interoperability?
Yeah, some of the things they actually have case studies, like they're going after like the opioid epidemic. So when people go and prescription shop, that interoperability, the de-identified data for that patient, like where they went and what have they got, as far as prescription and pharma is done really well. As far as other things, not so well. So there is some consortiums where people that join together, large health systems will join together for data interoperability, but it's all based on a single platform. And then the Yale University that was built was more towards children's hospitals, data interoperability of children's hospitals, looking for clinical trials and such for children's hospitals, and they were looking specifically for people to join. And again, there was a twist when I came into healthcare 6 years ago. The guy, the CIO, was originally the CIO from Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi. He had these great visions, and he was amazing about it, But one of the things was clinical trials, and then I got involved with some companies in North Carolina, South Carolina that wanted to incentivize the patients for those clinical trials that you guys were talking about. But that wasn't received very well, One of the big factors is still a lot of that data. There's still a lot of fire integration was happening, with ambulatory, all the different parts of the health system, but it's still so disparate. The data is everywhere. I haven't really seen a lot of healthcares that have achieved data gravity, everything in one place, so they could actually then do data interoperability. We still have fragmented data all over healthcare because of non-modernization. We're coming out of post-COVID. Again, technology is outpacing healthcare by 1,000 to 1 now because of just all the demand. And then secondarily, I think the focus is more on cybersecurity. They're using AI to attack health systems and steal you data on a daily, if not second basis. So healthcare is being overly outpaced by technology and then by nation state attacks on health in general. So I think everybody's frightened right now.
And just to piggyback off of what Matthew's saying, the fragmentation piece is huge, right? For a long time now, we all know that hospitals tend to be data rich and information poor. And in part, it's because of all of the data silos. And so even within one healthcare system, it's really hard to have interoperability between unstructured and structured data. And there's so much value to the unstructured data, not just the images, but the notes. And a lot of times, like that's just not that easy to access. And so you have these data silos within an organization, and not one healthcare system usually has enough data to, let's say, build some of these more robust AI models. So I do love this notion of the consortia and watching them grow and hospitals banding together to share data. But even sharing data is, oftentimes challenging and problematic. And so even if they're willing to share data, like, how do they really do that in an effective way? And how can it really be standardized so that they're looking at data sets that they can actually compare and then continue to build AI off of? And then you layer in the idea of, well, if we did this on an international scale, starting to share data across the different countries just makes it even that much more complicated. And so I do think that bringing the data together and trying to break down the barriers, not only within the institutions, but also between them, is moving in the right direction. But getting there is proving to be quite challenging. And then the other piece of what you said, Matthew, that I just wanted to add on to, which is the ownership, right? There's so much conversation now about data ownership and governance, and the hospitals are really oftentimes the brokers of the patient data, but at what point can we get more of that ownership back to the patient themselves, and what does that really look like? So I would love to hear others' thoughts on this, but these are some of the things that I'm hearing on the physician side.
All that you just said is the center of my world, Dr. Albo. I can't agree with you passionately enough. And there is an extraordinary opportunity before us to change our mental model for how we think about computation and privacy as a form of currency, how we think about not needing to centralize data anymore. And frankly, I think we have already reached the logistical, security, and ethical boundaries of data centralization as our first principle for value creation. The future of AI has to be across decentralized, splintered data silos. That means collaborative learning, swarm learning, federated learning. And without blockchain and Web3 as a guardrail and orchestration, transparency, explainability, verifiability data layer, that cannot be achieved. So it's a first principle based thesis. If you cannot continue to persist on the basis of indefinite data bloat and data centralization with exponentially increasing edge data and real world data and social determinant data that's not even officially within the health system, there is only one party that can centralize all of the information about themselves, and that is the individual data subject. This is why we need new institutions and a new class of infrastructure that can facilitate that occurring without a conflict of interest with the individual. But there is an individual can aggregate, curate, and ultimately monetize more information, more multimodal data, and it can be cryptographically locked on ingest, so it retains its clinical utility and appreciates its economic value. It can be enriched and annotated with a wide range of new classes of metadata that can create economic and scientific hooks into the utility of that data itself, but it has to be around the person. There is no other way.
I feel like someone just shouted the word revolution there. That AI in healthcare, revolutionizing patient care.
So I love that. Oh my gosh! Like Heather, like wow.
Oh, you were going to get mad. So glad.
I'm like whoa, because I heard 2.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0. I literally got up in a bed this week because I'll be in Copenhagen here this month on cybersecurity, like with like the original Bell Labs people and Anonymous and 4chan, and these guys are talking. We're not thinking about data operability of patient care. We're thinking about how to secure humanity from global cyber war and taking out hospitals and taking out everything. And that's why we're meeting in Copenhagen. And you just hit the nail on the head. And I've been saying it, I'm going to say it while I'm there, is we need a new web, unpolluted by social media, unpolluted by, really, it has to be regulated by the government. It has to be regulated by the international body of government. So you have to literally sign up, and it has to be encrypted. We have to know everything about you as an organization to be a part of this new exchange of data. I think it's the only way, like you just said, revolution. Has to be a revolution at the international level.
So really, you made an interesting comment there. You're implying that there's a couple of things that have been talked on, right? Data fluidity topic, making it accessible, but also requiring it to be secure. And I think, Matthew, you just touched on a really interesting subject, which is kind of regulation. Do you really believe that the data or the foundation that we build sort of AI around is you would recommend it be regulated by the government, or do you mean it just needs to be governed? What did you mean by regulated by the government?
The same as we have regulations on war and what weapons we develop.
Yeah.
This is a weapon. This is a weapon. We can weaponize our technology now. If you look at the most recent strikes on weaponizing, I don't want to say the two countries, but it was done through cyber warfare. Right now, most of our utility companies are being attacked and taken over. I live outside of Jacksonville, Florida, and they got taken over. Their water, their energy companies, our energy companies are at risk, and our healthcares are number one targets right now.
Yeah.
Headline news every single day. So there has to be something new, because it's not going to change. It's only going to get worse. Healthcares are budget crunch. Like the provider side, the payer side's great. They got plenty of money. The provider side, no money. They're mostly nonprofits. They don't have the funds to do anything. There's no real regulations. HIPAA doesn't really have any type of rigor around it. There's NIST for the government, but they don't comply to that. So there has to be some type of new regulation, international, that assist them. There has to be some funding to assist them to be able to achieve that. And there has to be some, like you guys know, there's got to be oversight. There has to be some type of oversight.
So I have to share, I'm a policy wonk and very deep in the subject of governance, including blending new modalities of computational governance with innovations in corporate governance, with new forms of public-private partnerships, including public-private partnerships that can formally include individual people, families, and communities legally, operationally, technologically, and financially. And I believe that structural approach, it's a admittedly complex blended governance approach that can assure radical transparency and a wide range of value propositions. But it absolutely has to be global in nature. And we are making tremendous progress quite quickly. There's exciting work going on in the WHO at present. There's still a lot to do. But I think there is a growing mind share about the need for genuinely different models for governance.
So one of the things during COVID, I actually witnessed it because of data gravity and trying to do clinical research and figure out COVID, was China CDC, US CDC, NIH, World Health Organization, they all came together and they wanted to start sharing models, and they did. They actually did share models. But again, nobody really knew about it, and there was they all joined in, but I think there needs to be a broader, there really has to be a much more publicity of how to accomplish it. And I guess there needs to be a driving force, really, a voice that.
I'm launching a campaign out of my foundation called the Wisdom Campaign, and maybe you all participate.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That sounds great, and I'd love to hear more about that, Heather. There was a thread that I want to pull on a little bit more, and that is that the patient as the ultimate owner and aggregator of our own data. I think it's something that became quite voiced. There were a lot of people talking about it with there was a no data without me movement that happened in meaningful use when there was a pretty significant requirement for health systems to ensure that a certain number of patients were actually downloading their data, and then that requirement was backed up because health systems basically said that people didn't want to have access to their own data. But at the end of the day, in addition to policy and organizations that come together from an interoperability perspective, it's important that we educate people and provide them with incentives to want to own their data and be responsible for their data, and give them the tools to ensure that their own data is accurate and up to date and aggregated. And so I think there needs to be more conversation. I haven't been seeing as much discussion about that recently, and I really feel like it's something that needs to be raised up and talked about more.
But this can't happen without a new market architecture for data, a new data economy, and a multi-stakeholder, a pan-stakeholder rethink on incentive alignment. It cannot happen without that. Everybody keeps trying to solve these problems by overlaying new technology on the old system without modifying any of its fundamentals. And we have to be willing to try some things that are authentically, truly new and different.
What do you recommend? Tell us. What are you seeing that you think has promise?
You guys will get me going. I'll never shut up.
She already said it. She said it. Web 2.0, Web 3.0, and whole new ecosystem.
She did, but very general. Let's hear something a little bit more specific.
Yeah, avoid social media. Jeez.
Well, I'll give you an example of a way to think about the structure. If you're familiar with the concept of a circular economy that comes from environmental sustainability, that same framework can be applied to a data economy that can fuel science generally. Translational science is included. I mean, we fund a lot of research, but we have oceans of evidence of interventions that we know are safe and effective, and we can't translate them. If we could translate, we wouldn't have the pop health that we do. So one of the things to think about this is, how would you begin to create a new structure? You've got to select a target cohort. You've got to narrow down to a geography. You've got to select a therapeutic area and identify an opportunity to show a new multi-party way for a whole set of stakeholders to align around a person in the center with a new infrastructural approach and a new operating model and a new economic model. And then be able to validate that at sufficient scale that we could have a rigorous assessment of, is this actually a viable systemic intervention? Can this? So I am a patriot. I have a great deal of commitment and years of work seeking to address disparities in veterans healthcare. And it's interesting because it is, in terms of unmet needs, it is the most well understood, rigorously researched, extensively documented. I mean, you hardly need to do any work on understanding the problem space because there's just volumes of data and evidence about what's broken, what's not working. And only 20% of care is delivered by the VA directly. 80% is out in the community, and the fragmentation that has been discussed creates terrible patient experiences for veterans as care is moving around organizational boundaries. That is an order of magnitude worse than it is for the rest of us, where it's already bad. So what we can do is imagine, and I'm giving you a case in point that could be used to validate what I'm talking about. So let's take this population with unmet needs that's very diverse, many of whom have significant challenges reintegrating into civilian life. I mean, all kinds of things that we know. Let's take a population with a higher all cancer prevalence than the general population, with a strong regulatory push for improved diagnosis and treatment, with the PACT Act, for example, and the Mission Act before that. And then let's say we have a whole pipeline of precision oncolytics trials in design across all of big pharma that is going to be spending umpteen billions of dollars with a very low capital efficiency and a very high risk factor for both the patients being experimented upon and the funders, the sources of that risk capital. As we consider the challenges of recruitment of a diverse population, and you think, so what is a transaction in this contemplated data economy? Well, who's the economic buyer? It's research sponsors. What do they need? They need a different kind of trial matching that has a hope of being reproducible in the real world, which means it has to be far more holistic. It has to include social determinants data. It has to be much more of there are innovations in research fundamentally that I've put that over here for a second. But the query that you need to be able to run is a privacy preserving query against an indefinite number of data silos that each possess a shard of information about a common data subject. So that that's multimodal collaborative learning and hosted secure inference that can that can all be audited, that can have granular selective disclosure, et cetera, et cetera. The funding comes in from a transaction from a research sponsor. This new ecosystem fulfills an order, but that order fulfillment involves a direct decision-making process with the data subject themselves. And they instead of I mean, no offense to IQVIA, and I'd hate to break their business model for them, but and because they can just keep selling the same data assets over and over and over again. It's a brilliant system that they've got going. This would be no offense. There's good people all over. There's no bad guys in our industry. Like everybody in every part of our industry is doing their best. But what this would mean is instead of buying de-identified data from a broker, you're getting fully longitudinal, full context identified data. Instead of a single use transaction, it's an indefinitely multi-use, because every consent interval you'd like to have can be connected to another remuneration event. And then all of that is about price discovery and creating a market economics instead of opaque, off-market, barely or decreasingly legal transactions. Instead, you have free market with economic agency, and you begin to create price discovery. And by the way, once you can price it, that means it can also become tax deductible. So corporations and individuals would have the option of being remunerated or to make a donation of an equivalent price into a new and ethically intentional inclusive data economy. By the way, that you can connect to the public policy agenda of nearly every department of the United States and the transnational agenda. We don't even need to argue for new appropriation for these measures. The funding to do those things is already in place. It's just the method, the way of going about it has not yet been attempted.
Thank you. That is so incredibly enlightening, and clearly you have thought about this for a very long time, Heather. So I want to make one more quick comment, and then I know that Dr. Albo, Alyssa has to potentially leave us pretty soon, so we don't want to just have to quickly bow out. But that model that you just described in leveraging the VA, there are other pearls of that, right? With the All of Us research that's happening with the NIH, we don't have the blanket of having one payer system. But we do have people who are actively contributing their data for research. Unfortunately, we're not remunerating them right now, and they don't necessarily have access back to the research that they're contributing. But that is a model. And there are a few other earlier stage companies out there that are doing some similar types of. They have access to large panels of patients that could potentially be participants in the diabetes space and other spaces. So that was a really brilliant account of how we could leverage something that's already in place. Michael, do you want to do something with Alyssa?
Anyway, I just the big thing that I was going to ask. I mean, I feel like we've just touched so many. We've gone to Mars and back right now. We've landed on Mars, and Alyssa, I'm glad you've joined. If just do what you need to do. No worries.
No, I appreciate it. I will need to go in a few minutes, but I'll end with this, and it goes off the heels of what Heather and Sunnie were both saying. You had posed a question to us, really, what excites us about AI in healthcare, and here's what it is for me, and it gets to Heather's point. First of all, Heather, thank you for your work with the VA and veterans. My husband served in the Army, and so that community is really near and dear to my heart. And I had the privilege of working with a startup last year who was focused on using AI for cohort detection, similar to Tom's point, but they were looking at veterans who'd be at risk for lung cancer. And the ability to use AI to detect early, to then be able to use the diagnostics with embedded AI to screen for the different cancers is really a game changer for patients in that community. And then the idea being is that it then goes broader, and those technologies then can be scaled. But I thought it was really quite special for me and unique that was the population that they were starting with. And then earlier detection means not only early diagnosis, earlier therapies. And it was great to sort of see pharma get excited about that. And then you can see why the payers would be excited about that. And obviously for us as physicians in that mix, it's helping us be able to detect earlier who are the patients at risk for all different disease states. So when you ask Michael, what excites me about AI, like that is it. It's that vision that AI can help us do what we do better, but in a situation where everybody wins, from the payers to the investors to the patients to the providers. And to me, that's really what it's going to take to move the needle forward. And I'm excited to be a small part of this journey. So yes, Heather, Sunnie, Tom, Matthew, like Michael, thank you for bringing this motley crew together. I have learned so much. So I appreciate being included on this panel. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we're so glad you're able to come.
Thanks.
Dr. Albo, I would just like to say to you, thank you. You're the one practicing physician that is on this call. You are on the front lines every day, being able to impart your wisdom to help change the system from one person at a time, but also at a systems level. So thank you.
Thank you, Sunnie. It's hard to put into words, but it's really a privilege to be on both sides of that equation. And practicing medicine, I like to say, keeps me grounded. It certainly keeps me humble, but it's a great opportunity to be there front and center, and then also kind of think behind the scenes on how we can do it better. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, awesome. We have mutual friends in Northern Virginia, like Chief Medical Officer that's also a technologist. I like that your tech brain combined with your frontline. It's just awesome.
Well, who would like to end this? I mean, I just feel like, Heather, you did a mic drop, and I thought, there's a few companies we're going to mention, specific AI, some good ones, some bad ones, but you guys took it to outer really beyond Mars today. So any last minute comments that anyone would like to just share as well?
Yeah, not necessarily a closing comment, but I really appreciate, Heather, your perspective. I learned a lot from some of your recommendations. And 2 comments. Number one, big fan of the VA. I think there's lots of improvement for improving outcomes for the folks that risk their lives to protect this country. But a number of my portfolio companies actually have active engagements with the VA. One is an advanced wound healing company that is a consumable play. They have a large commercial contract with VA, and it's sad to see some of our veterans come back from being overseas with advanced trauma, but we're happy to kind of serve them with this life-saving technology. And the nice thing is the VA has been very economically supportive of us refining the product, and that's been a very synergistic partnership. So I find that the VA is a great partner for really moving the needle on healthcare technology. But the other comment I'll make, and I don't like giving shout outs to startups unless I'm very, I really understand the startup, and I'm confident that startup would be supportive of me giving the shout out. So I'm a little bit cautious of privacy here, right? But Heather, as you were describing some of your recommendations and where you see the opportunities are, you made me think of a company called Consuli. It's Consuli spelled with a C, and their website is consuli.net. And I pulled their website up. It addresses all of the components I think that you were alluding to, and I'd love to follow up with you afterwards. They're all about enabling or empower patients to control their own healthcare information, but they're also creating data integrity and a data economy at once. And I think, it's the challenge there has been figuring out the business model and how we make money in the long haul or over the long haul, but that's essentially what the business is doing. They're structured as a public benefit corporation. They're based out of California. Essentially ripping off some of the data privacy regulations that have been put in place. But my thought is if some of those data privacy, data integrity policies went federal, I think Consuli would be a home run, across every single state, right? But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, and hopefully we can all follow up with regards to that and other topics.
I'd love to follow up with you on that, Tom. And just there is now proposed legislation that would federally preempt the variation in state privacy laws. So we're there, and the FTC just took the next to final step of harmonizing FTC regulated personal data relative to HHS regulated PHI in their motion around PHRs and define personal health records and defining that just earlier this last week. And that was all also on the privacy side. So we are like so close.
That's going to be a game changer. I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Matt, Sunnie?
Yeah, I do have a final thought, and that is, I think we need to be very cognizant of not leaving people behind. So Tom spoke specifically, and I think everybody has an interest in ensuring that we don't increase the digital divide. And if we are thoughtful about that, I do believe that AI, specifically generative AI, can be the great equalizer, much like what the internet did when it provided access to the same information at the same time. That isn't the first time that's happened. In fact, the radio was one of the great first equalizers. But I think as long as, again, we're thoughtful about the data that we use, the people that we involve, we actually have the ability to now make information and tools available to everyone at their fingertips that can help bring everybody to a much higher level.
Matt?
Wow, this is awesome. Great panel. And we all addressed similar things. There are some shout outs Microsoft's done a lot of work now and they're leading the AI space. I've been able to do about 200 strategies for AI or cloud, for healthcare, manufacturing, retailers. But, one of them that kind of struck my fits in here is Page AI out of New York. It's a leading digital pathogen transformation provider offering a full-scale AI-enabled web-based solution that brings efficient and confidence in cancer diagnosis. And their two focuses is on breast cancer and prostate cancer. They've been doing this for a while, so they kind of have large data sets. And then she said IQVIA, they've been doing some amazing things with clinical research. But NIH, again, regulation is big. But for my own self, I'm focused on cybersecurity and leveraging AI to counteract the unethical AI use around the world, whether it be AI use of data, protecting our data, but it's overall, leveraging AI to attack the attackers. So that's why I started Silent Interception and traveling. Going to start traveling the world, meeting with the creators of the Internet 1.0 to figure out what Internet 2.0 looks like and how we secure our hospitals, how we secure our infrastructure, because we are in a cyber war.
Are we finished, or can I make one remark?
Sure.
So a crossover between the last couple of remarks from a security perspective. Biometric data security, including full sequence human genomes, such like they have in the All of Us style study, implicates something that I call all of us for the rest of us. That's my chief scientific officer and my turn of phrase. But the movement to person-centeredness in a literal sense means that the only party who would have custody of extremely highly sensitive biometric data is no giant honeypot for hacker data lake. Instead, you've got N of one, big data where N is one, and it changes the incentives of cyber, offensive cyber. So, and then the national security and resilience implications of not of being able to deliver care, even if if a EHR system is subject to a ransomware attack, or God forbid, we're in a bioterrorism event.
And I guess the moral of the story is, even I know two-factor authentication is a good thing, right? Just a shout out to Change Healthcare. That might have been good. So anyway, this has been awesome. You guys are amazing. You made my week, my day. I really appreciate you guys coming on to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. This is great. Until next time, fam.